work in putting on this conference. Jesus said, "The greatest among you are the ones who serve everyone." You are serving us all, and we are very grateful. What a privilege for us to come here, to meet you in person, to begin to love you, to learn from you, and to be able to speak with you. I am especially happy to be here because in the past few years, I have used a book on Latin American philosophy in my introduction to philosophy courses. Now, Colombia is one of the countries in the region of the Amazon where Mexican philosopher Jose Vasconcelos predicted that a cosmic race, a synthesis of the four basic races of the present world, will emerge to fulfill the divine mission of America. In contrast with the ethnic egoism and nationalism, he said, that was incarnate in the Anglo-Saxon people of Europe and North America, the new race will be characterized by a universalist spirit based on love. Argentinian philosopher Augusto Salazar discussed the question of how Latin American philosophy can be authentic, not merely an extension of philosophy coming from Europe and North America. If we change that question to ask how Latin American students of the URANTIA book can bring forth their specific leadership, there are different ways to answer, but my proposal is this. You can lead first by being who you truly are. And second, by following revealed instructions excellently in your cultural and planetary environment. As you know, teaching is not our top priority. Most important is our relationship with God. We shall know the universal Father, receive the divine affection, and love him in return. That love in its fullness means that our supreme desire is to become in our sphere as he is in his paradise perfection of personality and in his universal sphere of divine supremacy. If I work too hard on my teaching and do not take enough time with the Father, I do not teach well. If we go forth to teach, what shall we teach? There are many things to teach, and one of the most important is the gospel of the universal family. If we study and practice this well, we learn much about disseminating the teachings of the URANTIA book. Proclaiming the gospel is not only for the past, not only for priests, ministers, evangelists. Jesus said, the persistent preaching of this gospel of the kingdom will someday bring to all nations a new and unbelievable liberation, intellectual freedom, and religious liberty. In his resurrection appearances, Jesus called all believers to proclaim the gospel. To 80 believers in Jerusalem, he said, that which the world needs most to know is men are the sons of God, and they can, through faith, actually realize and daily experience this ennobling truth. Melchizedek of Nebadon writes, all URANTIA is waiting for the ennobling proclamation of the message of Michael. unencumbered by the accumulated doctrines and dogmas of 19 centuries of contact with the religions of evolutionary origin. The hour is striking for presenting to Buddhism, to Christianity, to Hinduism, even to the peoples of all faiths, not the gospel about Jesus, but the living spiritual reality of the gospel of Jesus. Thus, proclaiming the gospel is for the present age and for us all. How shall we proclaim? We proclaim by our lives, in thought, word, and deed. First, we live the truth, or it would be more honest to say, we increasingly grow in our ability to live the truth. We cannot live the fatherhood of God as a limiting belief of intellect. We can only live it as a liberating relationship, the faith of the soul. In my classes in philosophy and religion, sometimes it is appropriate to communicate spiritual truth. When I try to convey the fatherhood of God, sometimes I allow myself to worry about the criticisms that I think some students will have in mind. When I see myself through the eyes of that criticism, a shadow of unbeautiful feeling comes across my heart. But when I live the reality of the relationship with the Father, I convey living truth. Another aspect of proclaiming is to walk in beauty. When we experience the beauty of truth, we know the joy and liberty of the sons and daughters of God. This realization empowers aesthetic leadership. We also proclaim the gospel in goodness by service, by following revealed instructions, by living the will of God. We have seen that truth, beauty, and goodness are dimensions of the gospel, and also aspects of our lives as truth teachers. In saying this much, have we said all of the essentials? No. Cosmic truth goes beyond the spiritual core. The divine counselor writes, the overstressed and isolated morality of modern religion, which fails to hold the devotion and loyalty of many 20th century men, would rehabilitate itself if, in addition to its moral mandates, it would give equal consideration to the truths of science, philosophy, and spiritual experience, and to the beauties of the physical creation, the charm of intellectual art, and the grandeur of genuine character achievement. The religious challenge of this age is to those far-seeing and forward-looking men and women of spiritual insight who will dare to construct a new and appealing philosophy of living out of the enlarged and exquisitely integrated modern concepts of cosmic truth, universe beauty, and divine goodness. Cosmic truth embraces the truths of science, philosophy, and spiritual experience. The truths of science are truths of fact. When we get serious about teaching well, we have to explore the truths implicit in facts of different kinds. Recall that love is an intelligent and wise affection, that love is the outworking of the divine and inner urge of life. It is founded upon understanding, nurtured by unselfish service, and perfected in wisdom. So love has its scientific aspect of intelligent understanding, as well as philosophical truths woven into its wisdom. One of the most important principles in teaching is to whet appetites. If you answer a question that no one is asking, people will not pay very much attention. This fact raises the next question. How do you get people to come to you with their spiritual questions? Here is Jesus' answer. Consider the Greeks, who have a science without a religion, while the Jews have a religion without science. And when men become thus misled into accepting a narrow and confused disintegration of truth, their only hope of salvation is to become truth-coordinated, converted. Let me emphatically state this eternal truth. If you, by truth coordination, learn to exemplify in your lives this beautiful wholeness of righteousness, your fellow men will then seek after you, that they may gain what you have so acquired. The measure with which truth seekers are drawn to you represents the measure of your truth endowment, your righteousness. Now, truth-coordinated living embraces scientific living as well as spiritual living. Scientific living is attuned to the facts of the present situation. Even the gospel itself is tuned to the facts of the present situation. We read that the Spirit of truth is designed to live in man and for each new generation to restate the Jesus message so that every new group of mortals to appear upon the face of the earth shall have a new and up-to-date version of the gospel. Just such personal enlightenment and group guidance as will prove to be an effective solvent for men's ever new and varied spiritual difficulties. The many sides of Jesus' gospel have tremendous potentials for addressing different spiritual difficulties. But what spiritual difficulties does this generation face? Look around, find out, study, ask people, use your knowledge, whatever you have about the truths of psychology, sociology, anthropology, history. You do not need to be a scientist to proclaim the gospel, but you do need to be alert to people's spiritual difficulties so that you can better align with the teaching of the Spirit of truth. One of the most important facts that guide teaching is the level of the other person's receptivity. What is he or she ready to hear? When I violate the limits of the other person's receptivity, I fail. When I work artistically within those limits, I succeed again and again. Does the person know God? Does the person have hunger for more truth? One of the most important principles of teaching is given by Jesus. When you enter the kingdom, you are reborn. You cannot teach the deep things of the Spirit to those who have been born only of the flesh. First see that men are born of the Spirit before you seek to instruct them in the advanced ways of the Spirit. Do not undertake to show them the beauties of the temple until you have first taken them into the temple. If your conversation partner is already in the kingdom, then you can think about sharing the beauties of the temple. If the person is not already in the temple, he or she needs an introduction to the gospel. Whoever wants to introduce the URANTIA to as many people as possible should remember this warning. Never, in all your ascent to paradise, will you gain anything by impatiently attempting to circumvent the established and divine plan by shortcuts, personal inventions, or other devices for improving on the way of perfection to perfection and for eternal perfection. If we follow Jesus' principle, we will not confuse the call to proclaim the gospel to all the world with opportunities to introduce the URANTIA book to individuals who are ready. In a resurrection appearance in Galilee, Jesus walked with the apostles 2 by 2, asking them questions and giving them instructions. To each pair of apostles, he asked a different question. Do you love me? Do you trust me? Do you serve me? Do you obey me? Do you believe in me? The first time I read this section, I felt certain pain. These questions seem to suggest a series of levels. I knew that Peter and John loved Jesus very much, and I knew that my love for him was not as great as theirs. But I knew that I could obey, and I hoped that I would gradually get better at loving. Now, 40 years later, I can say this. Obedience without love is not truly obedience. And love without obedience is not truly love. We are told, love, divested of truth, beauty, and goodness, is only a sentiment, a philosophic distortion, a psychic illusion, a spiritual deception. Religion stands above science, art, philosophy, ethics, and morals, but not independent of them. They are all indissolubly interrelated in human experience, personal and social. Yes, beloved friends, you are hearing me correctly. In talking about obedience, I am sounding the note of duty. The note of duty is often unwelcome, but there are 2 ways of sounding this note. One way views duty in isolation with its moralism and its self-righteous anger, causing resentment, resistance, and refusal. The other way of sounding the note of duty is in harmony with the other 2 great functions of the cosmic mind, worship and wisdom. Please recall them. Causation, the reality domain of the physical senses, the scientific realms of logical uniformity, the differentiation of the factual and the non-factual, reflective conclusions based on cosmic response. Duty, the reality domain of morals in the philosophic realm, the arena of reason, the recognition of relative right and wrong. 3, worship, the spiritual domain of the reality of religious experience, the personal realization of divine fellowship, the recognition of spirit values, the assurance of eternal survival, the ascent from the status of servants of God to the joy and liberty of the sons of God. These three basic factors in reflective thinking may be unified and coordinated in personality development, or they may become disproportionate and virtually unrelated in their respective functions. But when they become unified, they produce a strong character consisting in the correlation of a factual science, a moral philosophy, and a genuine religious experience. To connect duty and causation, we need to try to understand the causes of our sometimes unwise desires, actions, and projects. And we try to understand the realistic, historical wisdom of the instructions we have been given. To connect duty with worship opens up the fullness of spiritual experience. We read, "The satisfying joy of high duty is the eclipsing emotion of spiritual beings." In cosmic truth, the truths of spiritual experiences are balanced by the truths of science and philosophy. Cosmic truth progresses in the rhythm of beauty, of evolution, and in the goodness of obedience to the instructions of our superiors. It is possible to be filled with enthusiasm for spiritual truth and to fail in other ways. The gospel. He was a passionate and charismatic leader, but by displacing the gospel, he did not serve the fourth epochal revelation well. How did Jesus organize his epochal revelation? After his baptism, he retired into the wilderness to make great decisions that would guide his mission. He realized that there was a difference between his way and the Father's way. His way was based on what was pleasant and profitable, considering the immediate needs of this world. He had a strong desire to win people to believe in his epochal revelation and to accept his spiritual message. But he chose instead to reveal the Father, to do the Father's will, using methods that were natural, ordinary, difficult, and trying. His great decisions mostly revolved around the theme of power. Jesus had great power at his disposal, and he decided in one aspect after another to limit his use of power to the requirements of the Father's will. We too have great power that we can misuse. We have a new epochal revelation and digital technologies and other powers at our disposal. How shall we use our power? Will we bypass the essential gospel foundation and rush to share the book itself? Or will we follow the path of revelatory evolution and evolutionary revelation? I am not proposing a simplistic and rigid dichotomy. I am not proposing a simplistic and rigid dichotomy, but an emphasis that could make a big difference in our ability to cooperate with one another and be effective in the long term. When we ask how to teach, the answer includes beauty. Here is a poem that tells of the Aztec concept of flower and song. The good painter is wise. God is in his heart. He puts divinity into things. He converses with his own heart. He paints the colors of all the flowers as if he were a Toltec. The term Toltec means any great artist, poet, painter, sculptor, writer, who has a deified heart, which enables him to create. When we recognize the dignity and greatness of some of the pre-Columbian people who inhabited this hemisphere, we become more humble. We know that holding a book in our hands is not a substitute for insight and character. When we realize truth fully, we experience the beauty of truth. And when we perform our duty graciously, the beauty of goodness comes forth. In closing, I offer you some ideas on artistic living. There are aesthetic virtues, just as there are intellectual and moral virtues. The deity paradigms of artistic activity show a design phase. For example, the universal Father is the initiating thought, just as the eternal Son is the expressionful Word. And there is a performance phase, as the conjoint actor brought forth the billion perfect worlds of the central universe. And there is a phase of appreciation. The Creator Son in training studies the local universes of his elder brothers before going forth to organize his own universe. If we study Jesus and other model teachers, we can better design our ministry, grow in expressionful words of love and mercy, and in our performance of the deeds of truth. 2. Like truth and goodness, beauty is both a quality of divinity and also a reality that we can live. Walking in beauty is lucid, gracious, courageous, free from racing thoughts, tension, and the stress of our dangerously unbalanced world. Beauty may be found in activities as diverse as humor, play, sports, gardening, and the fine arts. There is an artistic way of composing our duties into a reasonable, doable, and harmonious order so that we don't get overwhelmed or burden ourselves with excessively high expectations. There is beauty in the very quest for artistic living, amid confusion, resistance, tentative steps, and fleeting successes. Through all this, artistic living finds ways to add an embellishing touch and to give others a beautiful experience. Sometimes we are clumsy and grouchy. Sometimes we are skillful and grouchy. Sometimes we are clumsy and joyous. Artistic living is skillful and joyous. We discover beauty by growing in our enjoyment, in delight and joy. Beauty calls forth some positive feeling, even in the mind of perfect poet, some good-humored smile. This does not mean that we adopt a set of crystallized emotions and repress the full spectrum of human feeling. What about the times when joy is impossible? There is also a beautiful way of undergoing the awful times when beauty is humanly eclipsed. Then suffering is fully human, and after it is truly finished, there arises from the ashes the sense that as all work together for goodness, preponderance of good prevails. On the whole, artistic living abides in a balance of joy. Artistic living enjoys a sense of freedom that carries the individual beyond slavish engrossment in the goal that is desired. There is a rhythm of reflective distancing and engagement. Call it being in the zone, or call it flow. 3 more points. 6, artistic living expresses progressive attitudes. A high proportion of great artists, musicians, and writers had great struggles in their lives, yet managed to bring forth beauty. It is only gradually that we learn to feast upon uncertainty, to fatten upon disappointment, to enthuse over apparent defeat, to invigorate in the presence of difficulties, to exhibit indomitable courage in the face of immensity, and to exercise unconquerable faith when confronted with the challenge of the inexplicable. 7, for artistic living, there is meaning and value in everything. Even in the humblest of tasks, one can find a dimension of value. Last, artistic living does not attempt to fashion the self into a mere means for others' artistic pleasure, or to try to make one's life into a spectacle for others' enjoyment. But when I see this slide, this image of the dance, I remember our singing together yesterday morning, and I remember our dancing together yesterday afternoon. And I have so much faith in my Colombian and South American brothers and sisters that you will lead the sharing of divine truth.
It was inspirational. Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to take this moment, since we're talking about art and beauty, to announce